Up next on the Handy Guys, we're going to talk about ethanol. So Brian, today we have Daniel Simmons with us. He is from the Institute of Energy Research, which is a think tank to promote free market policies in terms of energy. And we have him on as an expert in one of our topics that we've bandied around over the last couple of years, and that is fuel, not just fuel, but ethanol.
Ethanol additives in your fuel, and what the impact that has to the average consumer, the average homeowner, or the average handy guy or handy gal.
And also, you know, we've been hearing a lot of stories, Brian, about the impact of ethanol and the increased portions and amounts of it, percentages in fuel, and we're concerned about possible damage to our lawnmowers or.
Well, I'm worried about in my car and in my truck now. So that's why we have Daniel on.
All right.
So let's get right to it.
So Daniel, tell us, thanks for coming on the show for the Handy Guys podcast. And first, let's just start out with a simple question. Can you tell me, what do you know about ethanol as far as its impact on performance and engines and small engines and cars? That's
a lot of questions, Paul. Why don't we just...
Is it bad?
Why don't we just start with what is ethanol first of all?
Oh, that's a good point. Yeah.
You know, and then we'll get into the minutia there.
Yeah.
Okay. Ethanol and the ethanol that's in gasoline, that's an additive in gasoline, is the same thing that is the alcohol that's in beer, that's in, you know, spirits. That's what it is. But it is produced generally from corn in the United States each year. Corn farmers, make billions of gallons of ethanol, and so it's used as an additive in gasoline, as an oxygenate, to make the fuel burn cleaner. And so that's one of the reasons that it's in gasoline, but also because of some laws that were passed a few years ago, it's also mandated that billions of gallons of ethanol are produced every year, and that's the other reason that it's in gasoline.
So it's in gasoline because it's a law, and it's in gasoline because it makes the gasoline burn cleaner. Is that what you said? Yes.
Previously there was an additive called MTBE.
Right.
And the problem is, that Congress thought that was a good idea until they found out that MTBE contaminated groundwater when it got out of the tank, and so that was a problem. And so ethanol is a better solution, because around the country EPA mandates that various areas of the country have to have certain types of fuel so that there's less air pollution. And part of those additives are oxygenates, and ethanol is one of those, to hopefully make fuel burn cleaner.
But it does have some negative impacts on engines in general.
Without a doubt. I mean, ethanol is less energy dense than gasoline. A gallon of ethanol has 34% less energy in it than a gallon of gasoline, and then even more than a gallon of diesel. Diesel has more energy per gallon than gasoline. And so, but that's just one issue. The problem is that ethanol, it has very different chemical properties than gasoline. And those of us that have had ethanol in small engines know this, because it is more of a solvent, and so it picks up extra gunk, and
it seems to attract moisture as well as break down fuel lines, all kinds of problems.
Exactly, and that just has to do with the chemical nature of the ethanol itself, because it's alcohol. Right,
and because the ethanol is less energy dense, then that must have an impact on fuel efficiency, doesn't it?
It does. Your car is not going to, like, if you have there are many cars that are flex fuel vehicles that can run on E85.
Mm-hmm.
You do not get as good of gas mileage running E85, as in 85% ethanol, 15% gasoline, as you do on a car that runs on E10 with 10% ethanol, 90% gasoline. You get much better, you would get up to 34% better gas mileage per gallon.
So is it doing any damage, though, to the internals? Have any studies been done on the different formulas of ethanol, different percentages on whether it could cause damage to any of the parts of your engine?
Oh, it can definitely cause problems with your engine, especially with older vehicles. Newer vehicles, vehicles that have been made in the past 10 years many of them have been made with that in mind. Even the vehicles that aren't E85, just because they know there's more ethanol. But older vehicles were not made, more than 5 years old. They were not made with ethanol in mind, and so like you can have E10, which is what gasoline is in many parts of the country. Here in Northern Virginia, that's what gasoline is actually E10, and maybe even E15. But the problem is that we have these older engines, engines in boats or small motors like lawnmowers or leaf blowers. Those engines are not made for ethanol, and that's really one of the problems. So older cars and trucks are a problem, as well as even the newer smaller engines. There was a leaf blower I was looking at a little while ago, and I was reading the reviews, and apparently the company wants you to drain the gasoline out after every time you use it.
Yeah. Well, we've recommended that to our listeners and to our fans. We've recommended either running it dry, or
every time you use it.
Well, if you're not
or just at the end of the season.
If you're not going to use it for 2 or 3 weeks, run it dry. Now, if you're using it every week, that's okay. But run it dry, or add a fuel stabilizer that also has the components to mitigate the ethanol.
So what I find is that a lot of times when you have to do that and drain it, and then you're trying to get it into your California mandated crazy drain gas can cap,
right,
and everything else, you end up spilling more and doing more damage.
Right.
Just trying to
so
make your engine run.
So you said it's derived from corn. So what then is the impact to food prices? Is there an impact there?
Oh, there's definitely an impact to food prices. I'm spacing on the exact percentage, but I think it's about 40% of the U.S.'s total corn crop goes to making ethanol. I mean, it's a very large portion.
But is that because does that really increase corn prices, or is it just because there's such a surplus because it's people are growing so much corn because the government endorses that in its farm bill?
It's kind of both. I mean, first of all, they grow more corn because there's a place for it to be used. It does mean that there is competition for corn that there wasn't before, and since corn is used to for beef and for hogs and for chickens,
right. and sugar and high fructose and all that.
Yes, and so we get higher food prices. One of the groups that in fact lobbies in DC against the current mandate for ethanol are the hog farmers, the chicken farmers, as well as some of the restaurant people, just because it using that much corn means higher food prices.
Mm-hmm. Now, what does it do to the price of gasoline, ethanol? Does it make it cheaper or more expensive?
It's a good question. My belief is it probably makes it a little bit more expensive. Not too much. It's not the reason that gasoline is, say, $3.80 a gallon instead of $3 a gallon. It's not that much, but it is. It definitely increases the cost of gasoline because ethanol is harder to handle than gasoline. Like you cannot transport ethanol in a pipeline because unless it's a specially built pipeline only for ethanol. The reason is because it picks up water and all the things that it does in your engine. It does the same thing in pipelines. So it has to be. So it's harder to handle. So even if it's the same price, and it's a little bit more expensive, but not too much more expensive, but the added handling means that it will increase the price of gasoline.
So what about, and this might go beyond the scope of your think tank, but I'm wondering, I know there have been a lot of criticisms for some of the corn subsidies, and the fact that growers are growing it oftentimes at a loss, but they're being subsidized by the government. But the way they grow corn And you're trying to help the environment with the ethanol, but a lot of times farmers are using various kinds of synthetic fertilizers and things like that, and also creating monocultures and that whole thing. I don't know if you've ever had time to look into that, but it seems like there's a lot of critics of that whole singular monoculture and the way the corn is grown that are also causing damage to the environment.
No, that's exactly correct. Like the Institute for Energy Research, we oppose ethanol because it's a mandate. If it exists in the some ethanol would be grown, some ethanol would be used in gasoline without the current mandate. But we oppose it because it's a mandate. But we also team up with environmental groups because there are a number of environmental groups that oppose ethanol for exactly the reasons that you're saying. Because there's such a because they have to produce billions of gallons a year, that means more and more of the U.S. is planted as corn as opposed to a variety of crops are left fallow. Also, when you're producing corn, that means more fertilizer. That means frequently more phosphate runoff that get into streams and rivers. So the environmental groups don't like that. So there are plenty of reasons to dislike ethanol besides the fact that it is mandated at such a high level.
Is there any, I have no idea the scope of ethanol, but is there an argument to be made that, it's another source of energy and therefore the diversity there helps us out so that we're not, ever more increasingly relying on, import oil or something like that?
Well, that's exactly why we have the mandate in the first place, is that there were two groups of people. And in Washington, if you can ever get conservatives on one hand to agree with liberals on the other on a common policy, then it's golden. And that's exactly what happened with ethanol. First of all, you get the conservatives who were concerned about, they were like, hey, if we use ethanol, that means that we're importing less oil from overseas. And then the liberals were like, hey, global warming, this is a renewable fuel. It isn't just releasing carbon dioxide emissions. Those emissions, they come from, they get trapped into the plants. And so it's like lower carbon dioxide emissions. And so it looks in this case like it's a win-win. And for that reason, that's why there's a mandate. And this year, the mandate is 13.8 billion gallons of ethanol has to be blended into fuel.
Which is what is driving a new requirement at the pump, is it not? What kind of prompted us to bring you on the show was I had read somewhere that it's now going from a 10% requirement to a 15% requirement as the standard ethanol blend.
What's happening is that when Congress passed this law, especially back in 2005, oil consumption in the U.S. had steadily been increasing, and it actually peaked in 2005. Since then, oil consumption in the U.S. has fallen by about 10%. But when they were looking at that, when they were writing the law, it just looks like you were going to have ever increasing amounts of gasoline consumption. And so that meant that you have, like the way that the law is structured is you have higher and higher amounts of ethanol. So we're running into a bind because we have higher amounts of ethanol that's supposed to be produced and that lower amounts of gasoline being consumed for it to go into. So what's happening is that there's currently, because of the Clean Air Act, there is only what you can put in your car is regulated. What gasoline is as a mixture of chemicals is regulated, and you can only have 10% ethanol currently under the law. But what EPA, the Environmental Protection Agency, they're the ones that regulate that, and they can issue a waiver if E15, as in 15% ethanol, if they find that it won't damage cars or won't lead to environmental air quality issues, then they can allow that waiver to have E15. And that's exactly what has happened, is that EPA has said that E15 is fine for all cars, model years, I believe it's 2001 and later. And so they can have E15 pumps, but the problem is that the automobile companies, they don't want to have E15. I mean, they don't believe that E15 is good for their vehicles. And then the gas station owners are concerned that E15 would damage automobiles, so they don't want to sell it. So we're running into this problem because of a mandate, in that the ethanol has to be produced, but it doesn't necessarily have anywhere left to go.
Is there a Food and Drug Administration of ethanol that has to be approved or tested? And
well, it's the law in 2007, the Energy Independence and Security Act of 2007, it authorized what's the National Renewable Energy Laboratory to research E15 and and E20 as well, and see if it caused problems. And then the Environmental Protection Agency also has to study it. And what's happened is the Environmental Protection Agency has signed off. Then again, just 2 weeks ago, the Environmental Protection Agency was slapped down by the D.C. Circuit Court here in D.C. for its promotion of a different type, that it was promoting a different type of ethanol called cellulosic biofuel. It was overly aggressively promoting it instead of just objectively saying what the numbers are going to be. In other words, EPA is promoting ethanol, and that feeds into why they approved E15 to be used.
Now, there are some consumer groups that have come out against this, from what I understand. A little bit of research. AAA has made some statements. Consumer Reports have made some statements advising customers to be careful of, especially in older vehicles, in using this higher percentage ethanol in their vehicles. And that's caused some controversy, I think.
It has, with any older vehicles, and then again, the automobile companies don't want to be liable for any issues with newer vehicles. So it is a concern, and I don't know if it will be resolved in the near future. I mean, as the automobile fleet turns over time, yes, I mean it probably will be less and less of a problem. But one of the reasons that gasoline is we use a lot in this country is it's you go down to the gas station, you buy gasoline, you can put it in your car, you can put it in your old truck, you can put it in a boat, you can it has a variety of uses. And when it's becoming more of a specialized product, for example, like E15, you can use it in some of those things but not in others, and that's where that's where you run into problems.
Right. We used to have a gas station near where I have a small cottage about 100 miles from here. And the gas station there didn't have ethanol in the gasoline for a number of years. So I would always fill up a few cans to use in my chainsaw and weed whacker and all of that. No more. So now they have ethanol in those fuels as well.
Yeah, it used to seem like, how they have the different area zones with different pricing, especially here in Pennsylvania. If you drive out further from the where they refine the fuel, the further you go, it actually gets cheaper in upstate Pennsylvania. But they used to be, you could find a lot of the gas stations, I guess, didn't have to, have the ethanol, but now that's not the case. So.
Well, that is, there's a product at Home Depot, and I cannot remember the name of it, and I'm assuming it's at Lowe's. And
Yes. Oh, I should have brought a can of that with me. I have some. It's called, what's it called? I don't remember, but you're right. It's a fuel.
We'll put an image up of it right
it's
here.
A fuel,
right,
you buy it by the quart, and there's no ethanol in it.
And it's incredibly expensive compared to what compared to what gasoline is, and it's too bad that it's expensive.
It's about $16 a gallon. Last I bought it.
But if you have a leaf blower, it might make a lot of sense to use that instead of worrying about like harming the plastic tubes and the other problems that you get with those smaller engines.
Well, the guy that works on my chainsaw said, that's 90% of his business is his repair business is caused by ethanol now. So that's huge. He expanded his shop, and that's mostly what he's doing now. So that's helping small business, I guess, right?
Yeah, I guess so.
Well, yes, you're helping certain small businesses, but it's it's something that shouldn't be a problem in the first place.
Exactly.
So what's the solution to allow the free market to kind of determine the best fuel and the best price?
Well, that's our position. I mean, ethanol does have a purpose that's it wouldn't be necessarily 10% of fuel if it's being used as an oxygenated fuel, but it getting away from the law. I mean, this is a law of really unintended consequences, because we talked about the impact of food prices in the United States, but actually that's not the biggest issue. Corn is a global commodity, and what this law does is it increases the price of a staple food crop globally. So we're taking food out of the mouths of the world's poor and we're burning it in our cars. And for that reason alone, I think that we should, step back from the current mandate and, let the market decide. And there will still be ethanol. There'll still be a lot of ethanol. There just might not be, 14 billion gallons produced this year, for example.
I want a natural gas car. Can I get that? We got wells all over Pennsylvania.
I mean, that is the great thing that's happening is that natural gas, which has been very expensive, I mean, prices have been not in the not too distant past, within the last 4 years, the price has been up to like $13, $14 per million BTUs. And today it's about $3 per million BTUs. And when you start to look at maybe those prices over time being low, then it starts to make sense where you can have a compact natural or compressed natural gas vehicle. And that's exciting. I mean, I think that's pretty exciting, but natural gas prices have been very volatile over time. If they stay low for a while, you're going to get more natural gas vehicles, and then we can save the gasoline for our chainsaws.
Right. And Paul, I was talking to someone working in the Pennsylvania fracking industry and so forth, natural gas, and he said that as the technology for drilling these wells deeper and deeper, they think that deeper than the natural gas, they may have octane as they go down, which is essentially gasoline. Is that right, or is that not part of your expertise?
Well, there is one of the right now, natural gas is so cheap that it doesn't necessarily make sense to be drilling for more natural gas. But what is very valuable are the natural gas liquids and the these other liquid chemicals that are related to natural gas and they're related to oil. Now, what exactly is there, I don't know, and it depends on every field. But that is the reason that they're looking for it, is because natural gas is absolutely dirt cheap. But oil is still, on the global market, oil is still $100 a barrel. So that's why they're looking at those liquids, because with those liquids, they can be used, turned into used in the petrochemical industry, as well as used in the process of making gasoline. They're very, very useful and very valuable. So that's why they're looking for the other, not only natural gas, but natural gas liquids and other liquids related to oil.
All right.
Well, is there anything else we need to know about ethanol? Do we need to call our congressman or anything like that and tell them to get the EPA off our back, or what's the deal here?
Well, definitely call your congressman. I mean, if you've had these issues, and those issues are quite prevalent with ethanol, and they will only become more prevalent, especially if EPA is going to go to E15 or continues to promote that. Tell your congressman that EPA needs to hold off. That these are unfortunately we're creating businesses and growing businesses in like the repair business that as much as I like those people that are growing those businesses, they don't need to exist in the first place. So let's back down from that from our current promotion and the current mandate of ethanol, because it sure works a heck of a lot easier and is better to the world's poor if we're not burning so much corn.
All right. Well, we'll end it with that. I thank you, Daniel Simmons, for coming on and talking to us as the expert. We've been looking for an expert in ethanol for quite a while, but I think a lot of people are afraid to talk about it, to be honest with you. If they're profiting from it, some of the major manufacturers and other things, who knows? I mean, in some cases, an engine that doesn't last that long could be a good thing. I don't know. But yes, it's a serious issue, and we appreciate you coming on and talking about it.
All right. Thanks for having me.
Our pleasure.
So thanks for listening to Daniel Simmons, and thanks for checking out the Handy Guys. We'll be back next time.
Thanks.